In the summer of 1968, I received a substantial scholarship to study at Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. The purpose of the funding was to develop a team to support the government of sub-Saharan African country Nigeria in the recovery from their civil war. The team of about 20 advanced graduate students from multiple universities came together for daily classes and research sessions. I was also able to attend advanced classes in medical geography and geography of South Africa. By using my professional contacts at Michigan State, I was able to join a 10-week tour of Southern and Eastern Africa, especially designed for professors. The tour would travel between colleges and universities within Africa, only occasionally following the traditional tourist route and destinations. When the time came for my first international trip, I was a little surprised at 9 vaccinations being required. Flying into New York City, I gave myself a few days to enjoy New York. I took an air taxi helicopter and then landed on the Pan Am skyscraper. I also took the night time to visit New York club scene. I was in awe seeing Little Stevie Wonder simply playing on stage to a small crowd. A few doors down at a club about ready to close, I was welcomed into the club by the well-known singer Neil Diamond. I sat with him for a couple of hours while he screened opening talent for his national tour. In a few days, my huge airplane was aloft and flying toward the Netherlands, the first stop on my long African trip. The 6,000-mile flight to Cape Town, South Africa from Amsterdam stopped first at the airport in Rome, Italy, then flew over the moonlit ripples of the Saharan sand, through the turbulent thermals experienced at the edge of the equatorial climate belt, then on to the Congo. The last leg of the overnight flight showed the landscape of southern Africa in the morning light. Soon we were landing in the Cape Town airport. Cape Town, South Africa was our base for over a week. First full day, we experienced a gondola ride to the top of Table Mountain, towering over the coastal city. On top of the inland plateau, we visited many farms and vineyards. Several universities gave us wonderful receptions. The dining and hotel accommodations were world class. As we sunk down into our deep feather beds, we realized that the South Africa we were visiting was also impoverished morally and literally by the treatment of the Cape-colored and native Africans. Racial tensions were extreme. We had only white settler properties that were ringed with high walls and embedded with sharp shards of glass to remind us of so much of the potential for future racial crisis. South Africa was ready to erupt into bloodshed. That feeling was brought home by the hundreds of beautiful attack-trained German shepherds that we witnessed. We visited 2 countries that had locations surrounded by South Africa, Swaziland and Lesotho. In Lesotho, we saw numerous mines using buckets held aloft by cables, transporting ore from the mines to the local processing plants. Everywhere, the local streams were impacted by excavation, and the waterways ran pale yellow with toxic mine waste pollution. Johannesburg was an area of Dutch migration when they were driven during the Boer War. Lucky for the Dutch, Joburg was located on an endless seam of deep gold. Native Africans risked their lives daily digging for gold, for the wealthy of the world in inhumane conditions of low oxygen and high temperatures. From Joburg, we took a safari to the Kruger National Park Game Reserve. Viewing the diversity of grassland wild animals in huge numbers was more than a treat. Prides of female lions on the hunt, baboons climbing all over our car. It was an amazing experience. Dust devils, like small tornadoes, were seen on the horizon. This greeted us with an otherworld experience. From Johannesburg, we flew north to experience firsthand the majestic landscape and wildlife only Africa offers. A major highlight included visiting Victoria Falls, the largest waterfall in the world and one of the highest, dropping a mighty 355 feet into the Zambezi River. This giant cascade causes a fine mist, and this struck me in the face as I stood on the opposite side of the gorge. Later that same day, we traveled by helicopter upstream, where we observed giant hippo by the hundreds swimming in the Zambezi River. Resting on the shoreline, which looked like long tree logs, were dozens and dozens and dozens of crocodiles sunning themselves. One of my favorite national parks was called Engorogoro. It was formed by the collapse of a volcanic dome. Our lodge was located right on the rim of this deep dome. At night, a U-shaped grassland intentional fire was very beautiful in the distance. Our nighttime viewing was limited since our lodge was built into a hill covered with multiple round boulders, which happened to be the den of several leopards. They were often on the feeding prowl at night. Peacocks sounded the warning, and they were the natural guards for these large cats. Maasai tribesmen occupied the dormant crater floor. The residents we met were fascinated by my instant camera, and they were able to see pictures of themselves for the first time. I also traded U.S. Kennedy $50 for ornate strands of beads that came right off of their necks. I loved Africa's fascinating places like Olduvai Gorge, the ancient intact circular stone city called Great Zimbabwe, and the tall grasslands of the famous Serengeti. As our flight flew toward Nairobi, Kenya, we approached the famous mountain called Mount Kilimanjaro. Our tour group had asked the pilot of our large commercial jet to skim the top of the mountain for a better look. To our surprise, the big plane banked hard left and lowered its altitude. As we looked down the throat of the crater, we could see pools of hot lava as well as baby volcano features on the walls of the interior crater. Arriving in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, I felt like I was able to relax in an outdoor cafe and see adventurers from all over the world. In a few days, we were on the road to the Great Rift Valley. This rift was a major geological fracture in the Earth's crust. This rift was where all the linear Great Lakes of Africa were found. It wasn't very long until we were in an area called Mountains of the Moon, old volcanic features. As we entered deeper into the Rift Valley, we drove several miles to the other side, and the vegetation had been very dry. This grassland was dotted by the occasional flat-topped acacia tree, plus what looked like a prehistoric tree called the giant Baobab. Another title for this Baobab tree was the tree that God planted upside down. This is the only tree I've ever experienced where you could easily feel the inner fluid energy with your hands placed upon the gray bark of the mammoth trunk. After driving an hour, the vegetation increased, and we approached the giant rainforest of the Congo River Basin, home to pygmy African tribal people. One remarkable tribal adaptation was the slow cooking of plants and vegetables all day long in the hot springs, enabling the quick and easy preparation of dinner. Leaving the rainforest behind, we drove back toward Uganda on narrow roads, came to an area that had earthquakes every day. We took a break and laid out on the grass trying to feel one of the African earthquakes, but as luck would have it, we chose the wrong time. The last memorable adventure of my African tour was a visit to the island of Zanzibar off of the east coast of Kenya. This historical island was one of the primary Arab slave trading outposts for a long time. In the primary city, we saw stone walkways about 6 feet high in the air, built to parade innocent, kidnapped human beings into a life of servitude. We were some of the first visitors to the ancient Arab quarter in the city. The large commercial section of the city was just recently the site of a slaughter of 10,000 Arab men, women, and children during what was called the Night of 1,000 Knives. The polished brass appointed doorways gleamed in the early morning sun were all now vacant. My African experience was now ending. I boarded my plane traveling by air, first to West Africa and then on to New York City. The flight would be a total of 19 hours over the Atlantic Ocean. As I reclined in my plane seat, I started dreaming about oranges. Yes, oranges. We had left about 20 oranges spiked to an obscure thorn bush to tease and shock any future passerby. Also, I dreamed of when we sent a cascade of oranges through the air to a large baboon perched on the edge of a hill near the roadside. Each orange we threw caused our friend bewilderment. Since he could only hold a few at a time, when he had a couple of oranges in each hand, one under his chin and one in his mouth, the next flight of oranges made him topple backward, spilling all of his treasure. With that, he was joined by a melee of other baboons eager to play orange ball.